people need to know if their president is a crook, and I am not a crook. Does anybody know who that particular crook is? It's President Richard Nixon, quite arguably the worst president of all time. Or worst world leader of all time, for that matter, really. In 1970, Nixon created something lovely called the CSA, which is the Controlled Substances Act. Technically, he needed congressional approval in order to get this through, but he kind of slipped it through, like he did a lot of things, which is why people used to call him, as I'm sure Mr. Kirkham remembers, Tricky Dick is what people used to call him. Yeah, he was a real character. In 1973, President Richard Nixon created the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, to act as overseers of federal drug policy and enforcement. In August of 1974, not 1 year later, he disgracefully resigned for fear of impeachment because people were pretty much raising pitchforks at him. After him and Attorney General John Mitchell were accused of participating in the Watergate scandal, which he quite obviously did. It was kind of one of those OJ things, right? You know, everybody knew he did it, but he got off. At that time, even marijuana had been legal after a 1969 court decision declaring the Marijuana Tax Act, which is the original legislation in 1937 that made marijuana illegal. It was declared unconstitutional. The person who spurred that was actually none other than Timothy Leary, which is I don't know if anybody's ever heard of him. He's the 1960s and 70s LSD advocate. He got in a lot of trouble for telling basically millions of people on microphones, many occasions, to do LSD, and that it would change their life for the better. Nixon left the office in disgrace, but his war on drugs and his DEA still continue to this day. Today I'm arguing that the Drug Enforcement Agency, or the DEA, is a fiscally irresponsible, unnecessary organization and that it should be dismantled, and consequently the war on drugs ended. My credibility statement, why I'm so interested in drugs and pharmacology and whatnot, is as a botany major, I'm interested in various alkaloids and their relation to humans. It fascinates me that so many of these chemicals, they aren't estranged chemicals to our body. Most of them just merely replicate something we already have, or they're almost like molecularly identical to something we already have. Like, for instance, mescaline, I pointed out in my peyote speech, is almost identical structurally and molecularly to human adrenaline. Of course, one is psychoactive, and one isn't. Another example would be that opium, comes naturally from the opium poppy plant, right? We actually have receptors in our brain called opioid receptors. It's pretty trippy, It's almost like these plants are here for a reason, right? Also, our brain actually produces trace amounts of cannabinoids. How few people actually know that. It's in you whether you've ever smoked marijuana before, ever in your entire life. Cannabinoids are in our bodies. They're in our brains. How this relates to you guys, few people realize that even drugs as harsh as heroin and cocaine were not always legal in this country. Until the 1930s, drugs such as these could be bought over the counter, and there were no higher percentage of users nor related crimes. So it just goes to show one of the things Timothy Leary always used to say is he used to say people are just going to get high. There's a certain percentage of the population that is always going to get high no matter what. This is as old as literally cavemen throwing bushels of plants into a fire and sitting there, going like this and inhaling it. I mean, this is a very old, very, very human phenomenon. The main points I'll be talking about today are some of the DEA statistics from their own website. One needn't look further than their own website to make fun of these clowns, showing that they're a wasteful, unprogressive, and unproductive organization. Statistics showing how much of their arrests on a percentage basis are for cannabis alone and how ridiculous their stance on marijuana is, or cannabis. And lastly, I'd like to talk about how their famous war on drugs is a complete and total failure. Main point one. Some statistics from the DEA's website. This is their info here to show that they aren't really doing much of anything but treading water. That no real change is being made, and with an organization that has vowed to eliminate the drug crisis, right? Shouldn't that be their goal, to make some sort of progressive change? they're claiming to on their own website, but then their own statistics on their website show differently. For instance, the DEA makes claims on their own website that they have significantly decreased the amount of and quality of cocaine being dealt on the streets, but in their actual statistical information in a chart titled DEA Drug Seizures, it clearly states that in 1987, the second year they began recording for this particular chart, they seized almost 50 kilograms of cocaine, and in 2009, the last year recorded on the chart, they seized almost that exact same number. It is also noteworthy that they began this seizures chart suspiciously in 1986, even though the DEA was created in 1973. Right? You know, if that isn't shady, I don't know what is. The amount of marijuana seized in 1986 was around 492,000 kilograms, and in 2009 it stands much higher at 666,000 kilograms. So they're not doing anything here. Most of these, you know, I could go on to read even more of those, but I mean literally across the whole board, all the drugs that they list, most of them go up or they stay exactly the same. So, you know, this is proving they really aren't doing much anything progressively at all here. They're you know, like I said, they're kind of just treading water. They apparently aren't even doing much in the fight on heroin abuse. In 1986, 421 kilograms of heroin was seized. In 2009, 642 kilograms of heroin was seized. That's, you know, that's a very large increase there. You know, over 200 kilograms, right? That's like over a 33% increase. Next, I would like to talk about the DEA's outrageous budget. So, as we've shown here, they're not really doing anything progressive, right? They're just kind of, you know, treading water. They're just kind of, you know, twiddling their thumbs, more or less. And yet, they still get more and more money, substantially. I mean, very substantially. Every year, they get more and more money. In 1973, the DEA's budget stood at $74.9 million, with 2,700 employees. The DEA's budget continues to rise substantially each year, ending up at a staggering $2.6 billion in 2009. $2.6 billion, and this country's complaining about education, right? Mm-hmm. We're out there, you know, arresting people that really shouldn't be in jail. With that $2.6 billion in 2009, they had around 10,000 employees. So compare that to their 2,700 employees in 1973. That's an increase of about 5 times the employees, but 34 times the budget. Right? What organization do you increase your employees by 5 times and increase your budget by 34 times? I mean, that's incredible. It's ridiculous. You know, where is this money going? You know, the people should be asking. The DEA arrested 19,884 of our citizens in 1986 and 30,500 in 2009, peaking in 1999 at 41,000 arrests. The average for all 24 years recorded is around 20,000 arrests per year. So showing, you know, that they're just kind of averaging this base number here. They're not doing anything progressive. They're not arresting less people. They're not arresting more people. It's just kind of staying the same. Once again, you know, proving that a certain percentage of the population is just going to do these things. Main point number 2, the DEA stance on marijuana is a bold-faced and very old lie. I heard somewhere, I don't know who said it, but I heard somewhere that no lie can last forever, right? It's time for that particular lie to end. How many people would agree that cannabis, simple marijuana, is as bad to consume as heroin, PCP, MDMA, hallucinogenic mushrooms, or LSD? According to the DEA, it is. Marijuana is in Schedule 1, the most prohibited and regulated dangerous category, defined as substances with high potential for abuse and no medical value. California's Proposition 215, the Compassionate Use Act, allowing patients to legally purchase marijuana in dispensaries or marijuana clinics, begs to differ. And the 200,000 patients that voluntarily admitted, because California is actually the only state, and I actually didn't even know this until I did my research, but California is the only state that actually has a volunteer policy for the medical patients. They have at least 10 times more medical marijuana patients than the second place person, right? I forget which state it was. I think it was maybe Colorado. Mm-hmm. But